Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the SureWeb Azure Insights series. My name is Michael Slater. I am your host today. We are so lucky to be joined by some fantastic SureWeb staff and a guest from Nerdio to discuss some of the values for MSPs taking their first steps into the 1,000-foot ocean of options that is Azure. So we're kind of here to give you guys some insight, talk a little bit of shop, and maybe get something you guys can walk away with. So I'm joined on the Sure website by my colleague Nicholas Bouchard, one of our pre-sales solution architects. Give us a wave, Nick. Thank you. Also joined by Mr. Ford, one of our seasoned sales reps and one of my favorite road trip buddies. And also on the side of Nerdio, I have Tony, fellow road warrior. I see many of the time on the road, either somewhere in the US or coming out to our conferences. Say hi, Tony.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Excellent, thank you so much. So real quick, we have some interesting topics to talk about, and it's the hottest thing that's on the market, especially in this post-COVID world we live in, which is Windows Virtual Desktop, so WVD for short. This is something that my team is getting messages about pretty much every single day since things started to change in the world. How we work has changed in a way that a lot of us think it won't go back. So in a world where virtual desktops is now in the highest demand we've ever seen, why is it so popular? Why is it a keystone? Why is it something that everybody is clamoring to? So I'll kind of pass off the first pass on answer to Tony. So Tony, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's popular, and particularly now because when the situation we're in, everybody's trying to work from home, right? And in general, people have been using VPN connections and site-to-site VPN connections, and they might be using services like LogMeIn or GoToMyPC. But those services were never really meant for sort of permanent use and long-term use, right? So now there are people coming out of this madness. People are asking, well, what's a permanent solution if I really intend to work from home long-term, right? So the solution is not a VPN, and it's not some of these remote access services. What's something more permanent, right? And Microsoft, coincidentally, just came out with this service called Windows Virtual Desktop late last year that kind of fits the bill.
And that's a fantastic point, right? Because people need something that's not just for today. So a lot of the stuff that you mentioned, something as crude as a VPN, right? Or as crude as remote desktop, right? That'll really do the job for a couple of days. You just need to quickly log in, grab a file, put it to your home computer, and work on it, right? So for certain people, that might work. But long-term, logging in, the lag, the lack of quality, what happens if your computer at site B goes down? There's so many issues around like loss of productivity. I mean, for example, even at SureWeb at our head office today, the power went out for a couple of minutes. Imagine if we're all using RDS to connect, we would have lost productivity to all employees in the entire company based out of that one site. It would have been a disaster. So what do you really think it's important for people to focus on shifting to WVD instead of like something like a VPN? Like what's the biggest value they're going to get, Tony?
Yeah, so well, we have to think about why we need something like virtual desktop, right? So if you're setting up a VPN to get to your file shares, that's one thing, right? But a lot of times people are using line of business applications such as QuickBooks and Sage that don't traditionally work well over a VPN, right? So what do you do about that? So you have all these line of business applications out there, 90% of them aren't flat file based. What do you do? So having a virtual desktop permanently running in Microsoft Azure and migrating all your on-prem servers to Azure and having that essentially be in the same Azure local area network is going to give you that virtual desktop and that line of business application running at pretty much instant speed.
I mean, and speed is important. That's something that we always talk about as well too, because usually when people think about remote connections, they often envision lag, right? People, especially that have been in the workforce for a long time, they remember this proto 2000s logging in remotely to a server to download data, and they think, oh wow, just to update my database, right? Classic Perl database used to take an hour and a half to do. So that's people's vision. Exactly how quick is Windows Virtual Desktop if you set it up correctly?
Yeah, once you set it up correctly, it's indistinguishable from your physical PC that you're sitting in front of, right? And that's the whole goal. Right? If it was made any other way, it wouldn't be as successful as it is.
Yeah, so again, it's that instantaneousness, right, that people kind of don't expect, right? When you log in and you have a seamless experience. Like I always equate it to, when people used to legally download movies back in the day, right? They're kind of used to the speed, bad quality and everything, it really kind of affected the market. Then when Netflix came out, completely disrupted that. People had DVD quality movies available instantly anywhere. And, Windows Virtual Desktop, using that allegory, is much the same thing. because they're logging in and they're getting the same way that people got that DVD instantly in the cloud, they can watch any time. That's what Windows Virtual Desktop is for productivity. You're getting an actual live computer in the cloud, redundant, available anywhere you want in the world. So like that's the fantastic value of it. So always let's talk about that when we have those conversations. So real quick, this one's gonna be from Mr. Bouchard. About how often do you think that we're having conversations about Windows Virtual Desktop nowadays? Like, are partners fully embracing it? Do you feel like there's some friction still? What are some common challenges or questions you're getting around Windows Virtual Desktop live in the field today?
We do get a lot of conversation about WVD. It is quite popular of a topic. The biggest difficulty I would say is understanding that WVD is really a concept in the sense that you deploy. Yes, it's RDS, but it still requires virtual machines, but it's because you leverage a technology from Microsoft that makes everything so much better. Once partners and customers understand what is the WVD really, after that, it's really simple because everybody knows RDS, it's simply a better version of it. So that's, yeah, I would say that's the first step to enjoy and resell WVD.
Excellent. And I got another question because you mentioned RDS. So this is a common one that I see all the time, right? Because you know me, I'm a benevolent dictator, so I like to review all the tickets before they come in, as we all know. I do spot checks. So a common one I get, and this is an interesting request I see, is that people want a direct comparison of RDS to WVD. So if you were to give like a top level, easily digestible differences, what would be the top 3 differences between those two products?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The first point is really about what we call complexity. Microsoft is managing a portion of what we call the RDS stack, although the server roles required for RDS to work. They manage this. This is fully redundant, so as you can expect, you get the best quality of service in that case. It also means that you don't have to deploy and maintain those roles. Sometimes you don't need to deploy several machines that would be redundant for some of that RDS stack. So it's really a simplification of the environment, which in turn leads to obviously a lowering of the cost depending on what you want to do. It adds resilience or endurance to your architecture because you leverage Microsoft's own architecture for this, so you get free redundancy because of that. So it makes your environment obviously a lot more robust if anything were to happen. All you need is really the Active Directory and your sessionals or your Windows 10 machine, and that is all. And finally, I would say that especially with FS Logics, that was brought in by Microsoft so that it can go hand in hand with WVD, you get a much better experience for the end users. A lot of the problems that were present back in the days with user profile disk, that was very common with Windows Server 2016 and 2012, for example, have been removed. And now you get to enjoy a much cleaner experience. For example, just the OneDrive client install on your session. Nowadays, it is something that you can leverage using FS Logic, which was not possible with the user profile. So the technology is getting a lot better, and at really low cost. Sometimes at cost saving, actually, you get to use it from Microsoft.
Excellent. That's a good add-in. And actually, to add to that conversation, what I actually like to talk a little bit about is, you touched on FS Logic, you talked a little bit about the multiple sessions, you talked a little bit about the simplicity of it, right? Well, let's talk on something interesting, and this is how the licensing model integrates back into it. So, Mr. Ford, do you think there's a value of customers that are already selling full-blown, what used to be called the Microsoft 365 SKUs? Those are the bigger ones that include things like operating system Intune. Is there a value to people who already sell those licenses to get on the Windows Virtual Desktop train? Do you think it's a good thing for them to try it? Is there any licensing advantages to that?
Absolutely. I mean, if you ask me, is it beneficial for somebody who sells just the basic licenses? I'd say yes too. I mean, what they've done with WVD has been something that customers have been asking for years. I mean, we used to always get proposals where they'd want RDS, but they need to run CAD software or something like that. Right now, WVD lets you do that. But especially when it comes to Microsoft's global domination strategy of having everything together and all these bundles together, it's a great value. You know, $20 for Microsoft 365 Business Premium, formerly known as Microsoft 365 Business. If anybody out there hasn't caught up with the new changes yet, it's only $20, same price as an E3 was. or is, and they get the the Windows license, they get the email, you have the collaboration tools, really everything that you need in there. Lots of room for you to add your value to make sure that your customer is getting the absolute most out of every piece of that SKU, and it's a great entry point. So whenever you are deploying WVD, we tend to recommend, or we always do recommend, to have at least MS365 Business Premium as a SKU. And if you're already in that world of Microsoft, I don't see why you wouldn't go WVD unless you're trying to get out of the Microsoft world.
And as an add to that, so you kind of mentioned it, that when you're in the Microsoft world, you get a lot of value out of it. Well, out of that relationship, right? So are there other things that people get? Like, for instance, you get persistent identity, right? So are you able to transfer, let's say, your team session from one location to another? Can you transfer that kind of information? Is that persistent in that virtual desktop experience, Nick?
Yes.
What does that look like?
That would typically be a question I'd go to Mr. Bouchard for.
No problem.
For that one. So, but I remember him telling that we could, the specifics of it. Nick, I don't know if you want to jump in here and save me.
Mr. Bouchard, if you have any specifics, feel free to jump in. But at the end of the day, it sounds like a really good option because, again, if you can access Teams anywhere, so you get the same experience on your mobile phone as you do in your virtual desktop, it seems like a lot of value to me, Nick. Is that the case?
Absolutely.
It would be. People are still a little bit reserved about using Teams in WVD, probably because of the high latency or the bandwidth requirements that is there. But I'm confident that Microsoft is already aware of that situation and that they're probably working on making Teams a little bit less resource hungry. But for the moment, if people want to try, obviously it's more than supported. But we wouldn't necessarily recommend it right away.
Cool. It's not for everybody, but there's an option. And again, the main focus of this question is to highlight the fact that when you do buy one product from Microsoft, especially in this space, people tend to forget because they always like to kind of treat the modern workplace cloud and the Azure cloud as two completely disparate entities, which they're not. At the end of the day, they integrate back together. So you get a lot of value if you are reselling one of those solutions due to the uptake and sell another, right? Because again, it's the same reason why if you look at the Microsoft SKUs, if you want to just buy a very basic SKU, but you need to add one standalone feature like Intune, you can't do that. But the second you need two standalone features, you're better off just buying the bundle because of the pricing, right? And the same thing comes true in this. The more you buy from Microsoft, the more value that you get, especially when it comes to Windows Virtual Desktop or any other licensing, right? The full package will always do infinitely more than the smallest package will do. Something to keep in mind. Fantastic. So our next question, and this is really for Tony. So as an MSP, again, I know you for a fact used to be one, if I'm correct, Tony, used to actually work as an MSP. So in your opinion, what would be the significance of Windows Virtual Desktop? Like, where's the value in it for partners? How are they making money? And how does this fit into their current stack?
Yeah, so Windows Virtual Desktop, you kind of have to, and I did come from an MSP world. I spent 10 years as a senior engineer doing a lot of projects and then went on to do the sales role in the MSP. But the biggest sort of benefit is really, when it comes time to go and your customer's hardware is end of life, right? Let's say you've had a customer that has, HP or Dell servers and their PCs that were replaced maybe 3 years ago, and now it's coming up for end of life refresh. Instead of purchasing another piece of hardware and having, repeat the same exact thing you've been doing for the last 20 years, this is the perfect opportunity to go and say, all right, well, can I take my customer who's used to being 100% on-premise and take them fully to the cloud, right? What does that mean, right? Fully to the cloud, what benefits do I get? I can work from anywhere, from any device. I don't have to worry about a true DR plan, right? Because ideally things inside an Azure data center is much more resilient than it is in your customer's closet, right? You're talking about $1 trillion company managing infrastructure for you. So those are all sort of the benefits, right? And sometimes, people tend to go in and start selling cloud and say it's cheaper than on-premise, and most of the time it's not, right? That's the truth. But there's a lot more benefits in going cloud and not having to have that capital expense, paying everything on a monthly basis, just like how Netflix delivers a movie to your television screen. We're delivering all of IT into your customer's thin client or existing PC.
Excellent. So, that's the value of it. Now, let's drill down and go specifically into the Nerdio value of it, right? So I'm a new MSP. I'm going through different vendors and different selection process tell me, right? So out of the oceans of way people could do it, as far as it goes for deployment, why should people pick Nerdio? Why does it make sense for MSPs?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things, right? So there's a couple of reasons why somebody would use Nerdio. One is the confusion around using the pricing calculator in the Microsoft calculator, right? It's confusing. There's always, you might look at it and say, hey, Azure is too expensive, or there's some kind of little bug in the back of your head that says, I'm doing something wrong, or I'm not picking the right things. And so the calculator that we've created will help you assume a lot of these different things that most people aren't thinking about, and plug them into your full scope of your project, right? So that's on the pricing and quoting side of things, right? The second thing we do is we're able to spin up a fully running WVD environment in just 4 hours, right? So if you've never done WVD before, it's very PowerShell-like. It takes a couple of hours to just run through the PowerShell if you're a PhD in PowerShell, right? And of course, Microsoft just released a spring version, spring release of WVD, which makes things a little bit easier, but there's still a lot of missing gaps that IT people are looking for when deploying WVD that we fill. And then the third thing is after Nerdio spun up the environment inside your CSP tenant, we're able to give you a nice management interface that sits on top of everything to manage sort of your day two operations, right? Like what happens after you've deployed it? What happens after you've migrated your customer to it? Well, we help a lot with your day-to-day help desk tasks, right? Your typical things that take up a lot of time, your add moves and changes, all that is also automated inside of Nerdio. And so us coming ourselves from an MSP, we've kind of used our product ourselves for many years, and finally, so you'll see how our product is made very specifically for MSPs after you've trialed it yourself.
So let's say, for example, adding to your point, we do decide to go it alone. So I'm an MSP, decide to go and do it by myself. Exactly how much time can I expect to spend, assuming I'm not a PowerShell expert, trying to set up a Windows Virtual Desktop on my own following documentation?
Well, if you're not PowerShell expert, I mean, I think the first challenge is installing PowerShell and importing the right modules, right? The process of getting the right modules installed before you even begin the process is sometimes where it's a showstopper for some people, right? So that's specifically, but once let's say you go power through the PowerShell, let's say you make it through, right? A lot of times,
PowerShell, I like that one, Tony. You should patent that. But continue.
Yeah, once you power through the PowerShell, there's things about managing the infrastructure after it's all set up. That's a big challenge, right? And we work with MSPs of all sizes, and even the large ones. They say, when we enter an engagement and we spin up, a WVD deployment for somebody, and we hand it over to the end user to kind of manage. They go, well, what do I do with it? How do I manage it, right? There's no GUI, there's no, it's all PowerShell still. So how do you manage your images? How do you deploy, redeploy? There's so many things that sort of that there's a gap in currently that Nerdio fills. So it's more than just a PowerShell. It's what happens after.
Yeah, so basically, not only do we save time in deployment, but we also optimize as well too for the future, right? So when you look at the initial savings, which, let's be honest here, powering through PowerShell, I'm not an expert in it. A lot of my guys on my team aren't either. Even people that work in the space, a lot of us don't really know. We usually escalate to level 3, which, of course, Sherwood has by the boatload, but not every single MSP has those, right? So let's say conservatively, we take off that week of following documentation and power through for a relatively smart guy doing it. And then we look at the hours of saved implementation, the ongoing costs, like the savings really is very almost limitless depending on what you're looking at, right? So we're not only saving when it comes to the deployment, we're also saving on the ongoing costs, right? So not just are you going to save that couple hours off the top, you're saving hours into the future, especially if you have an engagement that's lasting. In an MSP contract, people are trying to go for 3, 4, 5-year contracts. That could be a lot of time saved over the next year, especially if you get a growing business that's constantly spinning up or spinning down units, right? Which in this economic instance, you never know which way it's going to go, right? So again, it's in a time of uncertainty, it seems like a really certain bet for MSPs right now, which is my pun I'll add to match your powering through PowerShell there, Tony. I refuse to be outdone on my own show. So fantastic. So I think this is a good starting point. Now there's some other topics I want to talk about really quickly, and this one kind of talks about just generally how we approach an engagement. So, as far as a partner journey, getting this Windows Virtual Desktop, Mr. Ford, if somebody goes and talks to you and they say, how are we going to get started? What's my first step? What does that first conversation with the partner look like when they say they want to start doing Windows Virtual Desktop?
So my first question always is, have you ever looked into Azure before? Try to get an understanding of where they're at, and also is there an immediate opportunity? There's a much bigger difference between assuming that you're going to have all these opportunities to sell and to have these different flavors, and I want to know everything and anything about it, versus having a specific opportunity or a specific set of customers that you're looking to sell to. Having so many options at your disposal, it can become overwhelming. So simplifying it is what I try to do whenever we can. Often I will engage with somebody who knows more than I do, which is pretty quick in the conversation. I'll loop in somebody like Mr. Bouchard or Tony comes on a ton with me on phone calls to get a better understanding. But the first step is really understanding what the partner's trying to do, where their knowledge is at. So try to do an assessment of sorts with them, assess as much of an assessment as I can do with my limited understanding, and then of course looping in the appropriate resources at that time. If they're just interested in uncovering what's going on and learning about it, I would often guide them to, there's a ton of great FAQs online. Nerdio University, I point to all the time with a bunch of great stuff. Trainings, certifications that they can go through, I think are really important. So sometimes we'll sponsor a partner, or I'll just show them where to go to get it for free. If it's an immediate opportunity, we'll quickly engage into a pre-sales discussion where we go over it step by step, handhold through, make sure that they understand what's going on, make sure that once we present them with the proposal, they understand what their options are. And usually there's a few versions of that, because the first one creates more questions, which we go back to the customer to figure out. And then we just do them one at a time after that, if they're able to sell it.
Excellent, fantastic points, man. I cannot possibly agree more, especially, and the first question is key, which is, how is your experience level in this type of product? It's very different, because again, we talked about this multiple times on the show, but it's very true. A lot of people come to us just saying, hey, I want Azure, like a noun, right? And that's kind of like, it's I want this. It's like, I want apple pie, I want coffee, I want Azure. And it's really more about, again, change management adoption, right? It's what's the goal of this project? We're going to kind of peel back the layers, we're going to go back to the very start of the reason why people want it and work our way forward from there. So what I like to do at this point now is kind of turn it over to Tony. So one of Tony's main things that he does for us, and he's legendary on the sales team, especially at Shure here, is for his excellent demo craft. So what I like to do, Tony, if it's possible, is kind of take that quick glance over the portal, pull it up and take a little look, and maybe show us what everything looks like. It's one thing for the four of us to sit here and talk ad nauseum about how great Nerdio is, nothing to kind of maybe see it in action. And again, I always invite people, look at the Nerdio interface and then go look at PowerShell if you've never seen it before, and the off chance you haven't. And you'll quickly see why Nerdio might be one of the best options on the market right now for people that, again, haven't quite powered through PowerShell yet.
Yeah, sure. So I'll be more than happy to demo this really quickly for you guys. So Nerdio's sole mission is to empower MSPs to build successful cloud practices in Microsoft Azure, right? And we do that in four ways, right? We talked a little bit about it before. We help with pricing and quoting, right? We help with the initial deployment, the ongoing management, and the ongoing optimization for the environment, right? So, spinning up servers up and down when you don't need them, things like that. So what you're looking at on my screen right now is what we call the Nerdio admin portal, which you'll log into as an MSP. So once I log in, I'm going to see all the different accounts that I've spun up using Nerdio in the past, right? So obviously I have a demo account with a couple of fake customers in here. And if I wanted to manage each one of them, I just simply click on login and manage them individually, right? Logging in and out of them, right? So single pane of glass management. But before I show you any of that, I think the number one important thing is if none of the technology matters if you can't sell it, right? So, and then of course, when, if a customer asks you, hey, quote me in an on-premise environment, you can pretty much go to your vendor, quote out a server, mark it up 30% and go and sell it, and be very precise down to the penny what something would cost. But if somebody asks you, hey, what's my infrastructure in Azure with WVD going to cost? Some of the worst things you could tell somebody is, hey, we don't really know, or it depends, or it could range somewhere between $500 and $1,000. Well, which one is it, right? So it's hard to sell to an MSP customer or SMB when you're not exactly sure on the cost. So that's one of the reasons why we made
Tony, just to sort of add into that, because I want you to expand on that a little bit. So, as far as it goes to the Nerdio cost estimator, I mean, you touched on a fantastic point, right, which is consistency in pricing. So in a world where people are used to the cost being the cost, especially as we transition from a capital expense to an operating expense, it is very, very important that people understand that they need to be precise in these sales, right? Because again, if you misquote something on a hardware portion, it's a one-time cost that, you know, a customer might actually forgive, right? Especially if it's $10 or $20. Now, if it's $150, $200, double the price over a period into infinity, it's a big deal, right? So how often would you guys say that you guys have saved people from making these mistakes? Do you think there's a tangible value to this tool when it comes to partners making sure they right size?
Right. So even with the tool, I mean, people can make mistakes by, you know, undersizing a virtual machine, which is why, you know, we have teams on standby to help you guys. But this tool is really the easy button to get an accurate quote, right? So actually, I just did this quote earlier today before the session started, and I'll actually probably use the information on here because it's accurate to a real environment. So let's say, for example, you have a customer that has 80 users, right, and they want to get everything out of their IT closet, and they also want to get into Windows Virtual Desktop, right? So first, we're going to click on the IT as a service use case scenario here. It's already selected, and I'm just going to pretty much answer these questions from top to bottom, right? And if I answer these questions correctly, I should have a very accurate quote, plus or minus just a couple of dollars, is what our partners have been telling us, which is very, very accurate in terms of Azure consumption world, right? So this question here says, well, how many Azure, you know, Nerdio desktop users will you need, right? So we'll put 80. We'll use Windows Virtual Desktop as an example. And now you still can quote RDS if you want, but for the sake of today, we'll quote WVD. Next question is, do you need any dedicated personal desktops, right? So in this scenario, the customer said no. Any graphic intensive needs? The customer also said no, right? So what are we looking to do in Azure, right? So we're going to pretty much take everything in our IT closet and move it into Azure along with their PCs on premise. So we're basically going to match what they have on premise, right? So you have a domain controller on premise, we'll give it a 2 core 8 gig of RAM machine. You have a file server, we'll give it a 4 terabyte data disk with an 8 core 32 gig of RAM machine. I think they were installing some kind of line of business application on there. Had a SQL server for a WASP inventory system that had 4 core 16 gigs of RAM with another 1 terabyte hard drive. They opted in for a second domain controller, which was a 2 core 8 gig of RAM. Actually, we don't need a hard drive for that one. So the point here is add as many servers as you need on premise, right? Match it all up, and you move on from there, right? So section 4 is we're really going to ask you, well, how many Office 365 or M365 business premium licenses do you want, or do you have, or do you need to sell, right? So let's just say this customer doesn't have any. You're going to sell 80 of them because that's how many users they have, right? So the Windows 10 license, the entitlement for the Windows Virtual Desktop is already included in the Microsoft 365 Business Premium license. So I don't have to actually include anything. I'll say the customer already has it. And we'll come down and we'll talk about, you know, Azure hybrid use benefits, right? The notion that you're going to pay for licensing up front to get a big discount in Azure. And that's certainly something that every MSP should be taking advantage of, right? We're going to buy a CSP software subscription. We're going to commit to using this environment for 3 years to get the best discount, right? And pay attention to this calculator in this little box on the left side. As I click yes or no, or 1 year and 3 years, you can see the differences, right? So it's always wise to commit to any 3-year reserve instances because you get the biggest discount from Microsoft. So we continue down answering these questions. Do you want in-region backup? Yes. Do you want site-to-site VPN? Yes. Right. Keep answering these questions. We come down here and we get to pick what session host these WVD session host needs to be, right? So for a 80 user environment, I like to use, you know, 8 core 64 gig of RAM machines, which are E8 SV3s. And based on the calculation of Nerdio's calculating, you know, 2 users per vCPU core, right? I can basically specify what type of users they are. Nerdio is telling me that during, you know, the 70-hour work week, which was what this particular client working hours were, that it's going to require 5 servers of 8 core 64 gigs running these 80 users, right? So it's already going to give you the cost for that. We come down, we look at some of the CSP discounts that you get from your distributor, right? We come down and we select which region that you're going to want to be in, right? So each region has services that cost differently. You don't really want to prioritize based on location, but prioritize it based on how close the customer is to you, right? So meaning don't price it, don't judge it just based on pricing, judge it based on how close your customer is to that data center to get the best round trip latency. So now you click view cost, and it's going to give you a cost per user per month, right? So for $55 per user per month, you get a breakdown of Azure being, you know, $19.73, Microsoft licensing being $14.08, Nerdio's licensing at $12 per seat. is $960. You get the total $4,341 divided by 80 users, and you get $55 per user per month your cost. And it's going to include all these machines running 24/7, right? So when we talk about bundling, here we just pull up our calculator and say, let's say you want to make 80% off of this deployment here. You take $55, multiply it by 1.8, and your sell price is, right down $99 per desktop per month, and you're getting all their IT hosted in the cloud with backup DR all included, with virtual desktops and all the proper licensing you need, right?
Yep.
So that's how you kind of calculate this.
Salesy, Tony, which I'll let that go because it is somewhat of a coincidence. I can't two follow-up questions. So two things that factor into this. So you did mention a little bit earlier that graphically intensive. So that could mean a bunch of different things, right? Can you give us examples of some verticals where that might play to for people listening to say, hey, would I potentially have clients that would fit that mold? Can you give us some real life scenarios?
Yeah, so certainly. So anybody who's in the construction field or really anybody that uses AutoCAD or Revit or Bluebeam or even Photoshop, right? Those type of workloads, they need, the GPU power to kind of crunch the renderings, right? So those are situations where you may want to specify, well, out of the 80 people, certainly not everybody uses a graphic intensive machine, but maybe, 8 of those guys are, right? So you put in the number here and you click on view cost. It's going to pull out the 8 users and tell you, well, we're going to use these NV6 machines with these GPUs attached to them so you can get that 3D rendering power. But I will add that, more and more we're seeing normal users also assign GPU machines to their WVD session hosts because, if you go to Best Buy or anywhere today, when you buy any computer, it's not only going to come with the CPU, it's going to come with an embedded GPU as well, right? It may not be a dedicated card, but it's got something, right? So more and more we're actually seeing GPU machines used as a default, even though a customer may not be using AutoCAD or Revit or any of those applications. You're just going to be able to take advantage of the hardware acceleration. So if you look at like your Outlook settings or your Word settings, you can turn off hardware acceleration, right? And what that means is if you turn that off, then the machine's not going to try to use the GPU. But if you leave it on and you don't have a GPU, that can actually work against you. So everything nowadays uses some form or another, some kind of graphic intensive capability.
Correct, especially if things are to scale. So it's not just for, your kids stealing your laptop to play Fortnite anymore. There's actually a practical use to it.
Right, like your Office app, those things are using your GPU whether you knew it or not.
Of course, well, to render, we'll look at it, right? If you look at something like Office 365, you look at things that you can do with like Visio or Excel, those are all rendering things for you right now, right? Instantaneously. So that's going to take a certain amount of power. My next question I have is really the other things that might affect cost we didn't talk too much about, but one of those things might be multi-session, right? So how would that play into costing for Windows Virtual Desktop?
Yeah, so before Windows Virtual Desktop, you were always able to run Windows 10 machines in Microsoft Azure, right? So that's not new. But what is new is you're able to now run multi-session Windows 10, which, if you subscribe to a larger box, right? Let's say that this 8-core 64 gig of RAM machine in here, how many multi-session Windows 10 users can you think about fitting in here, right? So that's where the user to core ratio calculation comes in. So in a 8-core 64 gig of RAM, you can easily probably fit 10 or 12 people in here, no problem, right? So now I don't have to buy 10 or 12 different separate VM machines. I can bundle them all into one large machine, paying one set price, and having people share that machine and thereby lowering my cost.
Yeah, so it's basic economy of scale, right? So we're talking about it's just basically the same thing you do in the hardware world, right? So instead of having a bunch of different servers doing one function, you can have a multi-tenant server that does many things. It's basic computing that applies both on-prem and in the cloud. And this is a classic example of where you can save a lot. Even in the cloud, it's not all going to be more expensive. You can actually find some savings as well too. So fantastic.
Yep. So yeah, let's move on. So now you got the pricing down, right? Now you figured out how to cost things. Now let's deploy it, right? So all you have to do is go to Nerdio, click on Add Nerdio for Azure account, right? We're going to pick the enterprise account and we're going to deploy Windows Virtual Desktop. You click Next. Whoops. Go ahead and click Next, and you specify your CSP global admin credentials that you get from SureWeb, right? So you'll go to the Cumulus portal, you'll select the Azure CSP pay-as-you-go. I think you have to talk to a rep first, but once you get those credentials, you punch them in here. You select the subscription that you want to deploy, select the region, name your domain name, right? Press save, and Nerdio will automatically deploy your IT environment in just 4 hours, right? Without any PowerShell knowledge, anything like that. Go home, have dinner, come back to it. This account will be finished provisioning, and you'll be able to see it on a list here, right? So from a management perspective, we're going to be able to go in, and now you have everything in one place, right? Now I'm managing this customer called Goodheart Inc. I can see, you know, when their customers are logging in. I could have my help desk guys all have access to this, so they can manage these this environment very easily. I can click on users and take a look at all my Active Directory users, which are also AD synced to Azure AD. I can assign them virtual desktops. I can unlock them if they get locked out by accident, right? I can see what AD groups they're a part of. And here's the help desk automation tools that I was talking about before, where we built in a lot of you know, IP to kind of PowerShell through a lot of the day-to-day help desk needs that most MSPs spend a lot of time going through, right? And I'll give one as an example that I find pretty funny, because, you know, when I first started my career, I worked at the help desk and I used to get this all the time, right? And so you guys could probably relate. You know, let's just say at 5:49 p.m. on a Friday, you get a call from Angie's boss and says, Angie's leaving the company. She found a new job. We wish her well. We hired a new person named Donna. Can you buy a new computer for Donna and have it set up Monday morning at 8 a.m., right? Well, it's 5:49 on Friday. What are you going to do? So the answer is no, right? And of course, their follow-up question is, well, can I buy it from Best Buy or Staples, right? And can you just meet me there? And the answer is no, because, you know, you have no control over what they buy, right? So, so that's a non-starter. So what do you do, right? But in virtual desktop world, just like the portability we gained from going from physical machines to virtual desktop or virtual VMs, virtual machines, we're going to gain that portability and customization on the desktop side as well. So what we have to do is go to Angie's settings here. We go to replace user, and let's just say we type in Donna Smith, right, and press OK. We're going to go and create Donna Smith's Azure AD account, Active Directory account, sync them to via AD Connect. We're going to create Donna's desktop off your golden image, which is going to have all their applications already pre-installed. We're going to take Angie's Microsoft 365 license, take it from Angie, assign it to Donna automatically. We're going to take Angie's mailbox, turn that mailbox into a shared mailbox, free up that license. And we're actually going to give full right to that shared mailbox over to Donna, so she has access to all of Angie's old emails, right? Because she'll be taking over a role. Then we're going to take Angie's desktop, documents, OneDrive, and SharePoint, and just redirect that to Donna's desktop as a little shortcut, so she has access to all of her old files. So just that alone saved, you know, hours and hours of work and having drive on site and procuring your computer. And that's just an example of one of the automations that just saves a lot of time, right?
So Tony, can this all be done within 5 minutes, right after you've been doing happy hour for 2 hours already?
Yeah, exactly. We even have a Nerdio application that works on your Android or your iPhone that gives you all this capability.
Perfect.
As
So
well.
you can answer right from the bar. A text stream.
Yeah.
I love it.
Exactly. So you can manage your groups, mailboxes, your servers. You know, this is all your server management, and Nerdio is simply just an overlay that sits on top of Azure that helps you orchestrate all these things, right? You're still managing these servers the same old way you used to manage them before using RMM. You know, you can manage your Azure firewall, your Azure VPN, your backup and DR. So this is, you know, an interface that sits on top of it, sits on top of Azure, and it's made to kind of replace the different tools and software you use to manage your on-prem environment, except we're using Nerdio to manage everything, and we're all using Azure services.
Just one quick add in there. You touched something important. So like exactly where would Nerdio start and stop, and where would we want to maybe have an RMM? Like where would that gap be? Because that's something that a lot of MSPs, that's like in their holy trinity of essential tools, right? So where do you guys kind of start or stop rather, and where would an RMM begin to take over?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you ask our CEO Vadim, you know, the first thing he said to me was, you know, Nerdio, we're not trying to recreate the Azure portal, right? We're not trying to do that. And we're not trying to create an RMM tool. We're just an orchestration platform, right? So once we orchestrate this for you, it's on you to kind of manage it, right? So I guess if you guys are familiar with the VMware, you know, ESXi stack, we're like vSphere made for Azure, specifically for MSPs. That's how I would like think about what Nerdio really is, right? So you're able to kind of resize machines, pick from different sizes, press OK to restart for you. You can add new servers. So you're utilizing VMware in the same way, except VMware works for ESXi, right? Or vSphere works for ESXi. Nerdio works in the same function and manner on top of Azure.
Okay, excellent. So basically, it does replace some of the stuff, but mostly it's around that total IT package, right? We're a complete virtualized environment. So it won't replace everything, but this is, again, a very convenient way to execute on the business critical infrastructure tasks. And that's really what Nerdio excels at in that case.
Right. And we have a library built in sort of automation that kind of helps you, spin servers up and down and add, move, and change users and things like that. So it's sort of a kind of a mishmash of many different things, I guess. But we're certainly not trying to be an RMM, or we're certainly not trying to just recreate the Azure portal.
Of course, but the whole idea here is that it's not to recreate it, but to capitalize on time expenditure, right? Which is the main focus here. Because again, time expenditure is the only resource in the world you can't get more of. So it's fantastic when it comes to that.
Certainly. Yeah, so that's pretty much Nerdio in a nutshell, and so I've kind of just taken you from the first step of your Azure journey, right? Having to quote it and price it, right? Figure out what margins you want to sell it, and then go and automatically deploy it, and then live day in and day out of this portal. Have all your help desk guys come in here and manage this environment going forward.
Excellent. Sounds great, Tony. Thank you so much for the demo. Yep. We appreciate it. It's always nice when demos are quick and they're only around 15, 20 minutes. That's always the best one that we try to do in our team as well, too. Glad it wasn't 5 hours of PowerShell. Thank you so much for saving us from that, Nerdio. We'll appreciate it. So it's kind of quick last summary thing, and this thing I want to talk about. So we kind of talked about the value, we talked about the why, talked about the who, we talked a little bit about the customers. So, if we look into this, if we go in the future, I'll ask this one question one by one to the different panelists. What would you say is the biggest reason why Windows Virtual Desktop is the future? So I'll start with Mr. Bouchard. What do you think this is the way to go and why this is such a game changer?
It is basically RDS 2.0, so you get that universal service that pretty much any business would require, so those virtual desktop that you can access remotely from, I want to say, from pretty much anywhere. But then you get the expertise and the skill set and the technology of Microsoft that is always kept up to date and always upgraded. And I'm really excited because WVD, that's right now is pretty much in its infancy, so it's at the least that it can do right now, but we know that it's going to grow and it's going to become something even more beautiful and even more effective. So definitely every company will benefit from going with WVD.
Excellent. Mr. Ford, same question to you.
Yeah, so from an end customer perspective, 3 things come to mind: mobility, simplicity, and security. Are what's gonna make this thing really take off. People, like I think I said earlier, people have been asking for something like this for such a long time, and although it can be complex for a partner to set up, your customer's not going to leave unless you do a bad job setting it up and onboarding them. They're going to stick around. They're not going to have to update. They're not going to have to upgrade necessarily as much. I can use a really bad laptop and connect to a great machine over choppy internet to still get my work done. It's going to take over. There's no question about it. Just a matter of when.
Cool. And Tony, I'll give you the last word. Pose this to you. What do you think is the big driver? Why do you think this is the future?
Yeah, and I think from a MSP, business standpoint, it's one of those other things you can add to add, Azure consume revenue and monthly recurring revenue, right? So if you sell a PC, you've made money one time and you don't see that cash flow for another 3 years. Here you're making money 80% every single month, right?
So which way different this is, and Pat, the point is that not only are we getting value for, what Nick discussed, we're not only getting value at being RDS 2.0, we're getting the elevated version of it. And as Nick said, we're now going to get the best user experience we can have, or if it's deployed correctly, it's a one-stop shop. And Tony pointed out for the partners, it's a win too, right? So from a partner point of view, they're finding a new way to generate revenue that is recurrent and just keeps on adding to that IP set that they have, right? So again, this is something that cloud mature MSPs are always saying, well, what's the next step? This is the next step, I think, for most people. And I think that it will continue to be well into the future. So everybody, thank you again so much for coming. Big shout out to the twin Nicks from SureWeb, and also a big shout out to Tony Kai from Nerdio for joining us today. This has been another one of our Azure Insights series. I thank you so much for your time, and I wish you a fantastic day, and hope to see you guys again soon.